Hello everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today we are going to look at the Millennial Kingdom. The word millennial comes from the Latin word for 1000. So the Millennial Kingdom refers to the time when Jesus will return to rule the earth for 1,000 years. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years. Now, Christians have long debated on what this passage means. Let me go over the different theological perspectives regarding the Millennial Kingdom. The first view is called Preterism. The word Preterism comes from the Latin word meaning past. Thus, Preterism is a view that the biblical prophecies about the end times have already been fulfilled in the past, particularly during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So the preterist interpretation of Revelation is to view it as symbolic pictures of different conflicts that happened during the first century. In other words, the book of Revelation is not referring to the future or the end times. So the description about the tribulation, the resurrection of the dead, and Jesus' second coming has already happened in history. Now, there's a spectrum to preterism. Mild preterism believes that Revelation chapter 6 through 12 was fulfilled in 70 AD, while Revelation chapter 13 through 19 is being fulfilled throughout history. Partial preterism believes that most of Revelation was fulfilled in 70 AD, except for the final resurrection and Jesus' second coming. Full preterism believes that all prophecies were fulfilled in 70 AD, including the resurrection and the second coming of Jesus. All three views do not believe that Jesus will literally rule for 1,000 years on earth in the future, but that it has already taken place in the past in some symbolic way. Now, there are several problems with preterism. First, God's covenant with Israel seems to be eternal covenants, and that there will be a future restoration of Israel. Thus, there will need to be a time in the future when all the promises for Israel will be fulfilled. In fact, the Apostle Paul warned against people who wrongly taught that the resurrection had already taken place, which implies that the resurrection is still a future event. Second, preterism assumes that the book of Revelation was written before 70 AD. If the tribulation described in Revelation was fulfilled with Nero's persecution of Christians, and if the book of Revelation predicts Nero's death, then the book of Revelation had to be written between November 64 AD and June 68 AD. Why? Because Nero's persecution began during November 64 AD, and he died in June 68 AD. That gives a very small window to claim that John wrote the book of Revelation, which seems unlikely. The second view is called Historicism. Historicism interprets the prophecies of the Bible as an overview of church history and interprets symbols and figures in the Bible as metaphors for actual events, nations, or persons of history. With this view, the symbols in Revelation are not seen as referring to a specific individual or specific events, but as types that can be seen in every generation. For example, every generation will have an antichrist or a mark of the beast. So historicism argues that the book of Revelation was prophecy when John wrote it, but most of the book has already been fulfilled throughout history. This view differs from preterism in that preterism views the events in Revelation as being mainly fulfilled in one event at 70 AD, while historicism views Revelation as being fulfilled throughout church history. The final view is called Futurism. Futurism argues that the book of Revelation primarily refers to future events. This view often divides the book of Revelation into three sections based on what Jesus told John. Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Following this three-part outline, Revelation chapter 1 refers to the past, or what John has already seen. Revelation 2 to 3 contains letters to 7 churches at the present time of John, or what is now, while Revelation chapter 4 to 22 refers to the events in the future, or what will take place later. The futurist approach sees John's vision from Revelation 4 through 19 as a series of chronological events. This view typically holds to a literal view of Revelation. Now, let's take a passage as a case study and show you how a futurist, historicist, and a preterist would interpret it. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who was in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. The futurist reading of this passage sees this as a prophecy that two evil individuals will face God's judgment. The historicist interpretation will read it as a picture of the continuous struggle between good and evil throughout church history, while the preterist view says that this judgment happened at 70 AD. Based on these three different theological perspectives, there are three ways to also understand the timing of God's millennial kingdom. Amillennialism is a view that there will not be a literal millennial kingdom, but that this kingdom is being fulfilled spiritually in the church today. This view became popular with Origen, an early church father, and his method of allegorizing the book of Revelation. Later, Augustine and his book, The City of God, solidified amillennialism as the dominant view of the church until the Reformation. Postmillennialism is a view that the millennial kingdom occurs between Jesus' first and second coming. Jesus will return after the millennial kingdom is fulfilled with the spread of the gospel and the Christianization of the world. Daniel Whitby was considered the founder of postmillennialism, and this viewpoint became the main view of the church during the 18th and 19th centuries. However, the popularity of this view went down after World War I, when it became clear that the world was not becoming better through the gospel. The final view, Premillennialism, views the second coming of Jesus happening before the millennial kingdom. Most premillennialists view the millennial kingdom as a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth, as the transitional kingdom that leads to the final eternal kingdom described in Revelation chapter 21. Premillennialism is based on a literal and chronological reading of Revelation. Old Testament passages such as Isaiah chapter 11 verses 6 through 11 and Isaiah chapter 65 verse 20 is consistent with the idea of an intermediate kingdom according to premillennialism. During the early church, premillennialism was well represented by several church fathers such as Papias, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, and Tertullian. However, premillennialism was overtaken by amillennialism with the influence of Augustine. Currently, there are two forms of premillennialism in the church today: dispensational and historic premillennialism. The main difference between the two views is their understanding of Israel's future. Dispensational premillennialism typically think that Israel will be saved and restored as a nation during the millennial kingdom. Historic premillennialism typically argue that Israelites will be saved, but that the nation will not be restored. Clearly, we see that there are lots of different perspectives about the millennial kingdom and the book of Revelation as a whole, which is why it is important that we each come to our own theological conclusions from careful study. Thank you to today's sponsor, Awe and Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about Jesus' second coming, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. Until next time, see you.